I tell thee plainly, everything that is, every mote of dust, every star that burns, every world that turns, every creature that draws breath or writhes in the lightless deeps, all of these are but the dreams of Azathoth, the fragmentary and unintended extrusions of its mindless hunger. The universe is not a creation. It is an accident. Before the earth was fashioned, and before the stars burned in the firmament, and before time itself had been divided into moments and eras and ages, there was the void. Let the reader understand that this void of which I speak is not the mere absence of substance, as the philosopher conceives of emptiness, nor is it the darkness of an unlit chamber, which is only the privation of light. It is a void that is itself a presence, a vast, animate, and purposeful nothingness that existed before existence, and that shall persist when all that exists has been consumed and forgotten. In the tongue of the outer spheres, whose accents no human throat can faithfully reproduce, this primordial state is known by a sound approximating Azathoth, though the name, as rendered in human script, captures no more of the reality than the scratching of a beetle upon a stone captures the roar of the sea. For Azathoth is not merely the name of the void, it is also the name of that which dwells at the center of the void, and which is itself the void's animating principle, the blind idiot god, the nuclear chaos, the Daemon Sultan who sits upon a throne of darkness at the uttermost center of infinity, lulled by the thin, monotonous piping of flutes that are not flutes, played by things that are not hands. I tell thee plainly, everything that is, every mote of dust, every star that burns, every world that turns, every creature that draws breath or writhes in the lightless deeps, all of these are but the dreams of Azathoth, the fragmentary and unintended extrusions of its mindless hunger. The universe is not a creation, it is an accident, a byproduct of the idiot thrashings of a thing that knows not what it does. And when Azathoth stirs in its black throne, and the piping falters for the space of a heartbeat, then worlds blink out of existence as a candle is snuffed, and the beings upon those worlds perish, without ever knowing that the ground beneath their feet was nothing more substantial than a sleeping god's twitch. The sages of old, knowing nothing of these matters, imagined that the world was fashioned by benevolent powers for the benefit of man. Even the wisest among them supposed that the cosmos was an ordered place, governed by reason and sustained by purpose. I say to thee that they were wrong in every particular, and that their error was not merely one of degree but of kind. The cosmos is not ordered. It merely appears so from the infinitely small vantage of the human mind, in the same way that a man standing upon a grain of sand might suppose the desert to be flat. The apparent laws of nature, the motions of the planets, the cycling of the seasons, the reliability of cause and effect, these are local accidents, temporary regularities in a sea of ultimate chaos, and they persist only because the Daemon Sultan has not yet turned its blind regard in our direction. I set down these words in Damascus, in the house of Yaqub al-Mansur, who gave me shelter when no other would, and who does not know the nature of the manuscript I compose beneath his roof by the light of a single lamp. Outside, the muezzin calls the faithful to prayer, and I hear them moving in the streets. These men who believe their God is watching over them, I envy them. I envy them as a blind man envies those who have never seen a fire, for what they have never perceived cannot burn them. But I have looked upon the truth, and the truth has looked back, and neither I nor it shall ever be the same. Let me speak now of the void as I came to understand it, not through study alone, though I have read texts in 7 languages that the scholars of this age have never heard named, but through direct apprehension, in the deep places of the earth where the walls of the world grow thin. It was in the 7th year of my wandering in the Roba el Khalie, the empty quarter, that great desert which the Bedouin shun and the wise man does not enter, that I first perceived the truth of the void. I had been drawn southward by rumors that the tribesmen spoke of only in whispers, tales of a city without a name, older than memory, whose towers could be glimpsed at certain hours when the heat shimmer parted like a curtain and the true shape of the desert was revealed. For 6 years I had found nothing but sand and death and the dry bones of those who had sought the city before me. But in the 7th year, at the hour when the sun stood at its highest and the shadows retreated beneath every stone, I came upon a declivity in the terrain, a depression so vast and so gradual that a man might walk into it for half a day before realizing that the horizon had risen above him. At the center of this depression, half buried in the drifted sand, I found the stones. They were not of any mineral I recognized, though I had studied the geological treatises of Ibn Sina and the lapidaries of Aristotle. They were black, but not with the blackness of basalt or obsidian. They were black with the blackness of a void, an absence that the eye perceived as color only because the mind demanded some interpretation of what it beheld. They were warm to the touch, though they lay in shadow, and they vibrated faintly, as if somewhere far below, at some inconceivable depth, a heart of enormous size was beating. I cleared the sand from around the largest stone, and found that it was not a stone at all, but the capstone of a stairway that descended into the earth. The steps were too large for human feet. Each was as wide as a man is tall, and I was obliged to lower myself from one to the next as a child descends from a chair. The stone of which they were fashioned was the same lightless black as the surface stones, and upon it were carved symbols that I did not recognize, though later, in the catacombs of Memphis, I would find cousins of those same symbols upon certain walls that even the priests of the old religion had feared to approach. I descended for what seemed many hours, though I cannot be certain, for my sense of time grew disordered in that place. The air did not grow warmer as one would expect in a descent below the earth, but rather colder, with a cold that did not seem to belong to any natural climate, but rather to the cold of empty space, the cold between the stars. And with the cold came a sound faint at first, so faint that I mistook it for the ringing of my own ears, but growing steadily as I descended, until at last I recognized it for what it was. It was a piping, a thin, high, monotonous piping, as of a flute played by some lunatic musician who knew only a single note and had been playing that note since before the world began. It came from everywhere and nowhere. It rose from the stone beneath my feet and fell from the darkness above my head and pressed against my skin like the touch of cold water. And as I listened, I understood with a certainty that bypassed the intellect and lodged itself directly in the marrow of my bones, that this sound was not a sound at all, but the audible edge of something far vaster, a vibration that permeated the very structure of reality, the background hum of the cosmos itself, which is nothing other than the echo of Azathoth's eternal and mindless dreaming.
Of the chamber I found at the bottom of those titanic stairs, I shall speak more fully in a later chapter of this work, for the things I witnessed there touch upon matters pertaining to the elder things and their dominion, which I shall treat in due course. Here I wish only to record the understanding that came to me in that place, the understanding which is the foundation of all that follows in this book, and without which no other teaching I offer can be properly comprehended. It is this, that the void is not behind us, but beneath us. It is not a thing of the past, some primordial emptiness that was filled when the world was made and ceased to be relevant. The void is here. The void is now. It underlies every stone, every sea, every breath of air. It is the substrate upon which the illusion of reality is painted, and the paint is thin, and in certain places, in certain very specific places upon this earth, and in certain configurations of the stars, and in certain states of mind, that can be achieved by the adept the paint cracks, and what lies beneath shows through. The wise men of the West speak of atoms and the spaces between them, and they imagine these spaces to be empty in the manner of a vacant room. They are not empty. They are full of the void, which is to say, full of Azathoth, which is to say, full of the churning, mindless, all-devouring chaos that is the true and original nature of all things. The order we perceive is painted upon the surface of chaos. The reason we cherish is a candle burning in an infinite dark, and the candle is guttering.
I write these things not to terrify, though terror is the natural and proper response of any sane mind to the facts of its situation. I write them because that which is not acknowledged cannot be survived. The man who does not know he walks upon a bridge of ice above an abyss will not step carefully. The man who does not know the shape of the predator cannot evade it. Humanity walks upon the thinnest of crusts above an ocean of primordial chaos, and it is my sorrowful duty to report that the crust is not as thick as we had supposed, and that there are things swimming in the ocean below that have, from time to time, broken through. The void, I have said, is animate. This does not mean that it possesses intelligence, for intelligence implies form, and the void is prior to form. It does not mean that it possesses will, for will implies desire, and desire implies a distinction between the self and the thing desired, and in the void there is no such distinction. What the void possesses is something for which no language of man has an adequate word, a quality that partakes of hunger and of dreaming simultaneously, a reaching outward that is also a collapsing inward, an eternal restlessness that is also an eternal torpor. The nearest analogy in human experience is the state of a man in the grip of a fever dream, thrashing, moaning, burning with visions that have no coherence and no purpose, generating worlds within his delirium that seem vivid and real to any creature unfortunate enough to be dreamed into existence within them, but which are, from the perspective of the dreamer, nothing at all. This is what we are. This is what all of this is. The stars, the worlds, the void between them, and the tiny, scurrying things that live upon the surfaces of the worlds and imagine themselves to be important, all of it, is the fevered dream of a mindless god. And the dream has no meaning, and the dreamer does not know that it dreams. I have said that the piping I heard in that abysmal stairway was the audible edge of Azathoth's dreaming. Let me now elaborate upon this, for it is a matter of great consequence. The piping is not merely a byproduct of the Daemon Sultan's existence, as smoke is a byproduct of fire. It is something more. It is the mechanism by which the dream is sustained. The thin, monotonous, maddening piping of the demon flautists who attend the throne of Azathoth, those amorphous, mindless entities that cluster about the nuclear chaos in a perpetual dance of idiot devotion. This piping is what maintains the rhythm of the dream.
what prevents the dreamer from waking, or worse still, from ceasing to dream entirely. For if Azathoth should wake, the dream would end, and the ending of the dream would be the ending of all things. There is a passage in the Pnakotic manuscripts, those fragments of pre-human knowledge that I obtained at great cost from the vaults beneath a certain mountain in Leng, which addresses this very point. I translate it here as faithfully as the medium of human language permits.
When the pipers cease, the dreamer stirs. When the dreamer stirs, the dream trembles. When the dream trembles, the stars fall from the sky, like dead leaves from a winter tree, and the seas boil, and the mountains crumble, and the thin skin of the world peels back, to reveal the roiling dark beneath. And then there is no more dreaming and no more waking, only the hunger, which was before all things, and shall be after.
These words were graven upon stone tablets in a script that predates the cuneiform of Sumer by untold millennia. They were old when the Elder Things raised their first cities upon the Antarctic continent, and the Elder Things were old when the first fish crawled from the sea onto the mud of the primeval shore. That such knowledge could exist at all, that something could have known these truths before any knowing creature, as we understand the term, had yet evolved, is itself a mystery that I shall address in the fourth book of this work, when I treat of the great race of Yith and their mastery of the currents of time. Let me speak now of the court of Azathoth, for it is needful that the student understand the hierarchy, if hierarchy it may be called, of those powers that attend upon the nuclear chaos. Surrounding the throne of Azathoth, in the abyssal center of ultimate chaos, there dance and flail the other gods, those entities which are, in a sense, the first and most direct emanations of the Daemon Sultan's dreaming. They are without form, without mind, without purpose, save that they dance, and that their dancing sustains the piping, and that the piping sustains the dream. They are the court of Azathoth, in the same sense that flies are the court of a corpse, drawn by something they do not understand, to circle endlessly around a thing that does not know they are there. Chief among these in power, if not in awareness, for none of them possesses anything that might be called awareness, is the entity known in certain forbidden texts as Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, the messenger of the outer gods, the soul and voice of those who have no soul and no voice. But Nyarlathotep is different from the other dancers at the court of Azathoth, and the nature of that difference is one of the most terrible mysteries in the entire corpus of forbidden knowledge. For Nyarlathotep knows. Nyarlathotep thinks. Nyarlathotep enjoys. Where Azathoth is mindless, Nyarlathotep is cunning. Where the other outer gods are formless and purposeless, Nyarlathotep takes 1,000 shapes and pursues 1,000 designs. It is Nyarlathotep who walks among the lesser races of the cosmos among men, and among other beings upon other worlds wearing masks of flesh and shadow, sowing madness and despair, bending the wills of kings and prophets to purposes they cannot imagine. It is Nyarlathotep who whispers in the dark. It is Nyarlathotep who answers when the desperate and the foolish cry out to the void for power or knowledge or salvation, and it is Nyarlathotep who laughs. I shall treat of Nyarlathotep at much greater length in the second book.
Here I mention it only to make clear the structure of the cosmos as I have come to understand it. At the center, Azathoth, the mindless source of all, dancing about the center, the outer gods, mindless echoes of the mindless source. Moving among them and yet apart from them, Nyarlathotep, the one conscious intelligence among the primal powers, the one who knows what all of this is and takes pleasure in the knowing. And beyond all of these, scattered upon the worlds and in the spaces between the worlds, sleeping in drowned cities and frozen wastes, and the lightless places below the crust of the earth, the great old ones. These are not of the same order as the outer gods. They are, in a sense, the great-grandchildren of Azathoth's dreaming, entities of immense but not unlimited power, bound by certain laws and limitations that do not apply to their progenitors. They came to the Earth in the unimaginably distant past, when the planet was still young and no life of any kind had yet arisen upon its surface, and they claimed it for their own. They built, and they ruled, and they warred among themselves and with other races, and in time they were cast down, sealed away, imprisoned by forces and configurations which I shall describe in due course, and they sleep. They sleep, and they dream, and in their dreams they reach out to the minds of men, planting visions and compulsions that echo across the ages. And this, let the reader understand, is the greatest and most terrible of all the truths I have to impart. They are not dead. They are not gone. They are here, beneath our feet, beneath our seas, waiting in configurations of matter and energy that our science cannot detect and our philosophy cannot conceive. They wait for the stars to come right. They wait for the thin crust of order to crack. They wait for the piping to falter and the dream to shift and the gates to open. And they are patient, for they are eternal, and time means nothing to a thing that does not die. That is not dead which can eternal lie. And with strange eons even death may die. These lines, which I set down here as the epigraph to all that follows, are the distillation of the truth I learned in the desert, in the vaults, in the dark places where the world grows thin. They are the Alpha and the Omega of the knowledge contained in this book. Everything else is commentary. And now I must set down my lamp, for the hour is late, and the sounds outside my window have changed. The muezzin has long since fallen silent, and the streets of Damascus are empty, and there is a wind blowing from the south from the direction of the desert, from the direction of the places I have been, and the things I have seen, and in that wind I hear, very faintly, as one might hear the memory of a sound, rather than the sound itself, the piping. Always the piping. It follows me. I shall continue tomorrow, if tomorrow comes. There is much yet to write, and I do not know how much time remains to me. Something knows that I am writing this. Something has known since I first set stylus to parchment, and it is, I think, amused.